Alright guys, I want to welcome you all back to some more of the house in Fata Morgana. So after we beat the game, where we last left off, we ended up unlocking the prologue. So I actually wanted to check it out prior to me starting off a Requiem of Innocence. So I want to see what this is about first, and if it's the same prologue we ended up getting in the very beginning of the game, then I'm just going to skip it, but I highly doubt it, because it was question mark before. So I'm going to see what this is about, and then afterwards we'll move on to the new story. So here we go. Wake up. Please, wake up. Come on. Good morning. What's the occasion? You never come to wake me up. I was merely concerned for your health. You really should be sleeping in a proper bed. You were concerned about me. You do realize the concept of health bears little meaning for either of us, don't you? Why would I not be concerned? You are me. If something were to cause you to depart this world, the same would happen to me. Ah, right. That's true. It was so long ago I almost forgot I told her she was me, and it would seem she still believes that to be the case. Foolish woman. What kind of herbal tea would you like to start your day with? I have some lovely mint leaves if you would like. They are wonderful for improving one's mood. I have no interest in or need for tea. That is most unfortunate. In that case, perhaps you could tell me a story. A story? You mean the one about Mikhail and Giselle again? Yes, that one. I do love that story also very much. I, for one, am growing rather tired of it. I've told it to you dozens of times now. Now, don't be like that. The best stories never stop being moving, no matter how many times you hear them. It's like I'm talking to a child. Alright then, how about this? I'm gonna ask you a question, and if you give me an answer I like, I'll tell you the story again. Oh, what kind of question? Nothing difficult, I promise. I want to hear your opinion on something. Do you think Giselle and Mikhail should be reunited? That is far from a simple question if I do say so myself. She would certainly be happiest if he were to return, yes. After all, Giselle yearns after Mikhail so much she takes the name Michelle when she is reborn. That she does. She assumes the same name every single time. But her namesake, the real Mikhail, has never once showed up. No, he has not. In which case, the more realistic option for her to attain happiness would be to forget about him and stay here in the mansion with me. I could take very good care of her, provide her with enough happiness to balance out all the tragedies she's had to suffer. This is brilliant. If only she had any idea how far off the mark she was. You are Giselle, my dear. Another question then. If hypothetically you were Giselle, what would you do? What do you mean? Would you still want to be reunited with Mikhail? If I were Giselle? I imagine I would keep waiting, yes. For someone who, after hundreds of years, has never shown any signs of returning? As long as the possibility remains, what is a few hundred years? Waiting is something I do quite well. Furthermore, I have not been through any of what Giselle has, so I would have little reason to give up hope. I almost want to tell her to drag her back through all her memories. Mikhail showing up at the mansion, never realizing who you really are. You, unable to bear the disappointment, the betrayal. Is something the matter? I think I'll refrain though. I have no particular desire to cause Giselle pain, and I wouldn't want her to break down entirely. She's of no use to me, non-functional. Your answer was not entertaining enough, so I won't be telling the story of Giselle and Mikhail today. It was not to your satisfaction? That is most unfortunate. I'm going for a walk. You, do whatever you please. Enjoy yourself. Oh, this is okay. They're showing a little bit of a prelude prior to Mikhail showing up as a spirit again. Okay, I got it. This is interesting. It's funny how she's still messing with her though, but it's not so far off the mark either. This isn't what I wanted. Tell me, it's not all my fault. Oh God. Closing your eyes won't make your problems go away. It won't erase your crimes. It won't take you out of this place. It won't make me despise you any less. Let me go. Please. I'm begging you. I feel like I'm gonna go mad. There's nothing here. Absolutely nothing. I vaguely remember a beautiful rose garden, but those memories just make it worse. I can't stand the sight of this emptiness any longer. You'd better get used to it, or accept your growing madness, because this is all you'll be seeing for eternity. It's not my fault. I'm not all my fault. Repeating that won't make it true. Tell me something, Mel. Who's the girl you cared most about? I presume you've been here long enough that you remember the era of roses. You remember what you said to your dear sister, the girl you once went to such a lengths to save? You called her disgusting. You pushed her away. You were a terrible brother and person. I can't stop laughing when someone like you starts going on about how much you care, how important this or that person is to you. Empty, superficial, meaningless words. I love it. Please, enough. Brilliant. I'm so sorry. You'll never have my forgiveness. Never. Farewell, my dear. Oh man. It's so funny seeing how she was telling him this and then what we ended up getting in the end. How she ended up letting him go and everyone else as well. I don't think I'll even bother with him today. Well, hello there, if it isn't Morgana. Where are you going? How you been? What you been up to? Want to have a little chat? Do you know the time? Hello? And I'm definitely not dealing with him. She barely had a conversation with Georges. Oh, I see you finally regained the appearance of a man. Your mind doesn't seem to be quite there yet, though. Having trouble moving around too? Whatever it is you're trying to say, I can't say I much care. I revile you far more than any of the others. You drained me of my blood, and then you murdered me. You're the worst of them all. Enjoy an eternity of agony. Eventually, the nothingness will become too much for you to bear. The more of yourself you regain, the more this place will eat away at you. I will say, it was quite amusing seeing someone as heartless as you try to show something resembling care for another human being. You learned your lesson though, didn't you? Ultimately, you're only capable of causing pain. So long, Lord. Morgana. Oh, back from your walk already? Not much to see after all. What are you looking out the window for? Come see for yourself. Look, there's a shadow outside. A shadow? It is heading toward the house. I do believe I see white hair too. It must be her. My oh my, I need to get things prepared to welcome her back. Her? That doesn't make any sense. The mansion isn't in the physical world right now. So how could she be here? Wait, is that... She chose a wonderful time to return. There's no one else here to take her attention. I might be able to convince her to stay with me this time. Perhaps. Giselle's gone so blind. She can't even see that that's not a woman out there. Is that you, Mikkel? After all these years, you showed up actually looking like yourself, without a body of flesh, at this gathering place of souls? I must have her be by my side. Oh, sorry. Wow. Way off. I must have her be my master, for I have been waiting so very long. Master? Yes, what about it? You've never once called her that. Oh, I haven't? I cannot say I remember either way. I'm going to add a few logs to the fireplace. We would not want the house to be cold when she arrives. You go do that. I don't get it. Why are you showing up now, Mikkel, looking like that? And what provoked Giselle to call you master? Well, it doesn't matter either way. Whatever your reasons, you're still frail and powerless. I suppose I'll just watch and see. I'm more than happy to keep you around, as long as you don't look like her. I too have been wanting to see you again, Mikkel, though not nearly as much as her. Ah, interesting. Okay. A ripple in eternity. Alright. Man, I love that soundtrack so much. I really want to get that. Alright guys, so this was pretty much the prologue to the main story, and it was pretty interesting now that we get to see the behind the scenes of it all, you know? So I'm happy about that. Alright. It's go time, guys. Here we go. A Requiem for Innocence. Oh wait, what the heck? I guess obviously I choose this first, right? Well, that was an interesting intro. I enjoyed that very much. Okay, so we're pretty much going to be at the point where we're relearning more about Morgana's story. Cheers, a saint's blood and good fortune to all. Oh my gosh, what'd they do to her? Voices. So many voices. Laughing. 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 Was this the 10th such party? The 20th? I no longer had any idea. The Lord's guests merrily drank of my blood. My father had not blessed me with his miracle, so wealthy nobles could fill their goblets with it. My blood was for the poor, for the infirm and the destitute. Why am I here? Why am I not holding my father's work? With each passing moment, my body grew colder and colder, while a mad, fiery fervor spread among the partygoers. Father, it hurts. My soul hurt far more than my body. It felt like it was cracked in a dozen places, about to shatter. Again and again, I've told myself it was just a trial, that God was simply testing me, but I didn't think I could bear it much longer. A horrible black miasma spilled from the wounds in my flesh, filling the room. What was that quick, sudden image that popped up? Don't think I didn't notice that. It was probably an illusion, something only I could see. The miasma soon began consuming my spirit. All my life I spent telling myself to be pure, just righteous, and all of that was just corroding away, ripping me asunder. Father, O Lord, of thy mercy, cut off mine enemies, and destroy all them that afflict my soul, for I am thy servant. I am thy servant. Please, O Father, deliver unto these sinners thy holy judgment. Cast them down into the depths of hell for the sins they would commit against thy faithful servant. Disguised as prayer, I cursed them. For the first time in my life, I wished someone ill. I did what a saint, what the daughter of God must never do. And in that moment, I committed a sin greater than anyone else in that room. Oh, so that's how that happened. The girl! Look at her face! I began to hear panicked voices rising up around the hall. However, I was completely oblivious to the cause of the unrest. In fact, I assumed that perhaps God had heard my wish and struck down some of the partygoers. The Lord marched over to where I sat up in chains, grabbing me by the hair and yanking my head up. In his other hand, he held a sword. A disgusted grimace was carved onto his face, as though he was looking down at the filthiest thing in the world. You're a damned witch wearing a saint's skin! This is worse than I expected. The stench of rotting flesh hung in the air. Corpses were strewn about the room in varying states of decay. Blood pooled on the floor, black and thick as mud. An eyeball hung loose from one body, half decomposed and about as much a liquid as it was solid. On many white bone was visible through patches of flesh that had rotted away entirely. Some had been worked to death. Others died of any number of diseases, and they were the lucky ones. Several bodies bore stab wounds from head to toe. Others looked like someone had tried to rip them in two. Some had been burned until their entire body shriveled, and some were covered in blisters. There was no shortage of people who had obviously been tortured. Though the man on the other end of the torture, the Lord Barnier, thought of it as more of a leisure activity. The Lord was spoken of in whispers as the second coming of the great tyrant of old. Though it wasn't until I stuck into his manner and saw for myself that I truly understood how accurate that was. He was a damn psychopath. I apologize that I couldn't make it in time to save you all too. I'm hardly a religious man, but for you, I think I can spare a prayer. Rest in peace. I'm not myself today, though I suppose that shouldn't be a surprise, considering what today is. I wonder if that girl from the other day is among the dead. No, I need to stay focused. If this goes south, I'll be the one joining this pile of bodies. God, I'm starting to get a little nervous. Don't go weak in the knees now, Jacopo. How can you ever expect to go out into the world if you can't even keep yourself together for something as straightforward as this? I can do this, no problem. Let's start ourselves a revolt. It all began a little over 2 weeks earlier. The local lord's iron-fisted rule was destroying the commoners, and this went doubly for those living in poverty who were barely scraping by before taxes. You could hardly take 3 steps out in the slums without hearing someone curse the Lord. I have no idea who first proposed the plan. Everything came together so smoothly, so quickly, it's almost a blur. What started as the everyday litany of complaints hurled back and forth between the usual crew of young indignant men in the pub soon escalated, ballooning into a full-fledged plot to strike back. He treats us like dogs! We're the ones working his goddamn land. Let's give the bastard what's coming. Over the next few days, word of the plot spread to the slums, and the number of volunteers grew at an impressive pace. And the more people we had on board, the more realistic it all started to become. While the original plan amounted to charging in headlong with whatever weapons we could scrounge together, it quickly evolved into a more sensible scheme to infiltrate the Lord's manor and free his slaves. It was no secret the Lord was purchasing far more slaves than he should have any reasonable use for. What we didn't know was what he did with slaves, that the banquets he so loved to throw were actually 6 sadistic torture parties. The best we could do was infer their living conditions were less than ideal from the fact that the Lord kept acquiring more. And while the plan to free the Lord's slaves was undeniably rooted in a righteous desire, I would be lying if I said everyone's intentions were so pure. We wanted to right an injustice, absolutely, but the prevailing desire was for vengeance, to give the Lord a little comeuppance. Part of it was also calculated, that it would be advantageous for it to look like a slave revolt rather than a civilian uprising. If we struck down from the outside, we were liable to bring the Lord's wrath down upon more than just a handful of us involved. But if the blow came from the inside, he couldn't blame us. Secondly, the Lord's mansion sat atop a hill, which meant his soldiers had the advantage of the terrain. It would be nigh impossible for a band of lowly, ill-equipped peasants to break through his defenses, and we certainly didn't have the money to hire mercenaries. No amount of righteous anger was getting us anywhere near the manor. On the other hand, quietly getting one person inside to stir the pot was far more feasible. So ultimately, freeing the slaves was a means to an end. It was our best chance to deal the Lord a real blow. Of course, that didn't mean we wouldn't save as many people as we could, nor did it mean we would be easy to pull off. It would be easy to pull off, or that any of us would make it out alive. The plan went as follows. We would find a slave trader willing to sell one of us to the Lord. Once they had infiltrated, they would spread the word of scheme to the other slaves, trying to get as many of them on board as possible. Finding a slave trader willing to cooperate was surprisingly easy. They're businessmen, and slaves their product. While the majority didn't give a damn what happened to the slaves after they received payment, there were more than a few who were displeased knowing their precious wares were being squandered. Slaves are supposed to be long-term workers. They're not meant to be expendable. They require food and rest in some semblance of reasonable living conditions. It was far from a glamorous life, obviously, but most sensible slave owners at least had vested interest in keeping their workers alive. However, that was far from the case with Lord Barnier. Slaves were, of course, the property of whoever purchased them, and a mere slave trader had no place complaining about how they were being treated. That didn't mean the traders had to like it, and there was a small collective of them who staunchly refused to do business with the Lord, quietly mocking any who did. Nobody openly spoke ill of the Lord, let alone oppose him directly. Not only because this land was under his control, but because he was a madman and everyone knew it. So they would help us get in, and nothing more. But that was fine. That was all we needed from them to put our plan into action. And the vanguard of our operation, the one who would infiltrate the Lord's manor, was me. I volunteered for the position, partially in the heat of the moment, but also because I was confident I could pull it off. Above all, though, I didn't want to believe that I couldn't manage such a straightforward task. I had to step up and take initiative, or I would never escape this life as a poor, lowly slum dweller. Crawling through the dirt, everyone, nobles and peasants alike, looking down on me, thinking I'm worthless. That would be me for my whole pathetic life. Like hell I was gonna let that happen. I wanted to claw my way up as high as I could manage. I didn't want to surrender, to accept that I was powerless. I wanted to make something of my one and only life. We chose the beginning of the Lord's next banquet for my infiltration, and that was when I saw the horror for myself. The abuse and torture he put the slaves through. It was a goddamn blood banquet. Any mistake, no matter how small, would invite harsh discipline. Barnier was in particularly foul mood that day. He would physically beat the wrongdoer. He had a particular fondness for activities that drew blood though, and he would regularly gather together nobles with similar predilections at his manor. Once a banquet had begun, it generally continued for around 2 weeks. first thing I did after infiltrating was spread word of the plan to the other slaves. To be honest, I assumed it would be easy to getting them to cooperate. They should have reviled Barnier more than anyone after all, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Every ounce of willpower had been drained from them. They were malnourished, unrested, and violently oppressed. I could hardly have convinced them to swat a mosquito. He had them completely under his thumb. Everyone was utterly terrified to fight back against Barnier. They would just as soon take their own lives. Hardly a day in and the plan was already seemed to have hit a wall. A full week I spent trying and failing to convince a single soul to assist in the revolt. Just as I was beginning to fear it might not work after all. We need to talk. Come with me. He was a tall, muscular slave who spent most of his time doing physical labor. Despite the poor conditions, he seemed to be keeping himself in rather good shape. And unlike the other slaves, his eyes weren't filled with fear and resignation. But it wasn't hope I saw in them either. Rather, they looked like the eyes of a bloodthirsty wolf. Looks like we got ourselves a new character, guys. And his unkempt, greasy blonde hair only served to amplify the primal impression he gave off. Between that and the faint cocky smirk visible on his lips, he more resembled the head of a gang of ruffians than a slave. I wasn't sure if it was entirely wise to accompany him anywhere, but against my better judgment and with far too little information, I followed the man to the Great Hall. There were a dozen or so nobles and upper-class men and women clustered about the hall. The air was filled with the scent of aromatic herbs, and it wasn't long before I realized they were meant to mask the smell of blood. A large table was lined with plates stacked with piles of glistening dark red meat. Noblemen sneered at us with wet lips as we entered the room. The contrast between the nobles' practiced graceful mannerisms and the grotesque feast of which they were partaking was so bizarre, I simply stood there aghast. There was no room for anger to form. The lord stood on a platform like a small stage at the far end of the room. Are you the slave who offered to be the day's entertainment? The buff man nodded, dropping down to one knee. What does he mean by entertainment? Surely you're tired of merely inflicting pain on helpless slaves. Would you by chance be interested in something a little more exciting? Could you be any more disrespectful? Lord Barnier, you would do best to rid yourself of barbarians such as him. There, give the poor man a break. You can't expect an uneducated slave to be properly versed in the ways of polite society. Now, elaborate, slave. Me and him, we duel. Right here, right now. Do you seriously think we haven't already pit slaves against each other numerous times by now? If that's all, tell me, were they as vigorous as the two of us? Young and chomping at the bit? Well, if all y'all want to see is a couple of half-dead slaves limply flailing at each other, then help yourselves. But you're not gonna find many here what can give you a fight with some real oomph, you know? Hell, half the slaves here probably keel over with just a little shove. So I figured you might be up for a little change of pace. A barbarian like me? Whoa, I never agreed to this. Suck it up, you're a slave. Since when have you had the right to agree to anything? You make a compelling argument. Gradient. Was it? Gratian? Gradient? I'm gonna call him Gratian. Gratian, was it? My lord knows my name. I'm honored. I only remember because you came very highly recommended. The slave trader said you were descended from a line of warriors that made a name for themselves fighting in the ancient Colosseum. I had assumed he was exaggerating, but perhaps there was some truth to it after all. Who can say? Couldn't tell you about my ancestors. But what I can tell you is that I just love a good duel. What, in the Colosseum? Descended from gladiators, and I'm supposed to go one-on-one against him? Very well. Guards, bring these two swords. Sir. Shit. What is he hoping to accomplish? To win Barnier's favor? I guess I'll just have to hope I can catch him by surprise as soon as... Hey kid, listen up. What? Eyes forward. And keep it down. Listen carefully. Don't get any wise ideas, got it? Just go along with it. Everything on the level. What are you scheming? You'll find out soon enough, assuming you can handle a sword anyhow. Two guards approached us, each carrying a sword. It was heavier than I expected, and it felt awkward in my hands. Both of our blades were badly chipped, clearly old and battle-worn. Of course, they wouldn't give new quality weapons to a pair of slaves, but a sword was still a sword. Beaten though they may have been, I still had to be careful or I'd be dead before I ever got the slave revolt off the ground. That said, I had survived this long in the slums. I wasn't completely helpless and I had experience with a dagger, though I wasn't sure how much help that would be now. The longer two-handed weapon still felt awkward in my hands. As I squinted at the blade's hilt and adjusted my grip, trying to familiarize myself with the feel of it, Barnier took a seat, readying himself to spectate. That's when I caught sight of what lay hidden at the back of the stage. What? I stood there, staring at Gabe, completely forgetting I was but moments from a duel with a man twice my size. At the back of the stage was what looked like an altar, draped in a thick white sheet and stained red. Atop it sat a young girl covered in gashes. Her head was drooped so I couldn't see her face. But judging from her size, I didn't think she could be more than 10 years of age. Some wounds were older and had already scabbed over. Some were swollen, bright red protrusions on her pale skin. Some were oozing pus, and others were so fresh they were still bleeding. It was difficult to find a part of her body that wasn't cut. Hey, what do you think you're doing to that girl? I don't care who you are, no one deserves that. Even as I shouted at the Lord, the girl remained motionless. She seemed unconscious. Not dead yet, but it wouldn't be long. Silence, cur. I don't recall giving you permission to speak. Or, if you'd rather lose your head right now, continue on as you are. Damn despot. Now go on, get started. Give us a show befitting of this grand affair. Fighting my urge to snap back at him, I turned to face the slave named Gratian. The other guests lined the walls, whispering among themselves, speculating about the potential victor. The crowd was so overwhelmingly in Gratian's favor, to absolutely no surprise, they didn't even bother taking bets. Try not to go down in one blow, kid. Hold on! What's the point of this? Slowly, Gratian lowered into a crouch, and the next second, he leapt at me like a tiger. There was an audible whoosh, and before I even had time to gasp, he was mere inches away. What choice do I have? I swung my sword, catching Gratian's blade mid-descent and attempting to parry, but there was far more weight in his strike than I had expected. The impact caused my hands to sting painfully and my knees to buckle. I clenched my teeth, trying at the very least to hold my ground. Ah! Gratian barely gave me a little time to recover, let alone strike back before launching into a second attack. He handled the longsword so effortlessly, swinging it through the air in such impressive perfect arcs that I could hardly believe he were both using the same weapon. Ha! I twisted out of the way, but not quite in time. The tip of his blade skimmed the skin of my neck. And then, not even giving me a chance to catch my balance, he thrust his blade at me. While I managed to deflect the attack just in time, I wasn't able to follow through. Meanwhile, a wide mocking smirk spread across Gratian's face. He seemed to be having the time of his life. Come on, kid, you're gonna have to do better than that if you want to keep your head. Ugh. I rattled off several insults in my head, but unlike him, I couldn't spare the energy to put them into words. Pick it up, boy. Gah! God damn. That all you got, kid? I thought you'd fare a little better. Shut your damn mouth. I was struck in the defensive, and with every strike he pushed me farther and farther back. I was almost up against the wall. I thought he said this was a part of some plan. Or was he just trying to get me to let my guard down? He's conspiring with the Lord. He must be. Why, he challenged me to a duel, though. Did someone spill a word of the plan to him? Come on, give me your best shot, boy! Gah! Yes, very funny. You know damn well I'm barely managing as it is. You gotta at least try. Don't want to put our audience to sleep now, do we? Even the bones in my forearms are starting to sting. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Here, let me show you how it's done. God, I can't get a damn inch on him. Much more of this and I'll be up against the wall. I'm dead if I don't go into the offensive. That's my last chance, while I've still got breathing room. Hey, big guy, you may think you have the advantage, but not for long. Ha, that's rich, coming from a guy who can't even get one swing in on me. It was all a trick to get your guard down. I've been saving this one just for you, meathead. Good luck dodging it. With that hulking body of yours. Now that's more like it. Let me have it, kid. I hopped backward a couple of paces until my heel was pressed up against the wall. There was no backing down. Not anymore. Breathing heavily, I lifted my blade, pointing it at Gratian. He pointed his in turn, a cocky grin plastered on his face. And then, I kicked off the ground, hard, sending me flying toward him, my sword held down near my waist, his above his head. And then, whoosh! He whipped, his blade ripping through the air just over my head. The mere force of the gale created by his swing was so intense. For a brief moment, I thought he might have knocked my head clean off my shoulders. But I was still breathing. And despite the exhaustion, my mind was incredibly clear and focused. I hadn't swung up at him, but slid across the floor. Your back's wide open! I lurched to my feet, spinning around, and swung my sword at his neck with everything I had. Ah! Yeah! What? But my would-be grand comeback was deflected from behind without a bat of an eye. And hardly a wimpy deflect for that matter. My hands felt like they were on fire. Little bit on the dirty side that was, but hey, not half bad, kid. Damn it! Just a little more oomph to that swing and you might have landed it. Too bad, too bad. I don't stand a chance against him head on, but he's not one to fall for the same trick twice. I need a new plan. Back against the wall, will ya? Son of a... Gah! What's the matter, kid? That all you got? After all that talk, I was expecting a little more from you. Gah! He's got me completely under his thumb. I'm dead if I don't do something. I can barely lift my arms anymore. It's getting harder to breathe. My vision's going blurry. I can't die yet. Not here. Not now. And not to this damn brute. There has to be something. An opening I'm not seeing. Anything. Some way to turn the tables. Am I imagining it? Or did I react to that quicker than usual? Is he doing what I think he's doing? Patterns were forming in my mind. I've been through this routine so many times now, my body instinctively knew what came next. I parried his strike entirely by reflex. I wasn't so full of myself as to think it was a sign I was getting the upper hand. As much as I loathe to admit it, he had every imaginable advantage over me. I should have realized what he was doing sooner, but I'd been so focused on keeping my head attached and my sword in my hands that I didn't have the spare mental capacity to see beyond that. He was in complete control. The only reason I was able to keep up with him was because he was letting me. Because he was repeating the same sequence of attacks again and again. If I'm right, then next, he'll come from above. Ho-ho! Right on the money. A clang like the pealing of a bell echoed through the hall as our blades collided. It was much cleaner, more satisfying sound than they had made when I was struggling to keep up. I still don't know what he's scheming, but I'm not going to throw away this chance to win back some ground. Sparks flew with each clash of our swords. Gratian's smirk grew wider. I could hear murmuring bubble up in the gallery as the tides turned. Cheering, cursing, confused gasps. But before long, the sound seemed to grow distant. It was just me and Gratian in a bubble of silence. Not even the sound of metal striking metal, my heavy breathing, the stomping of our feet, the distractingly loud pounding of my heart, the blood pumping through my veins. It was all whisked away into nothing. Every one of my senses were focused on exactly two things: the image of our swords cutting clear arcs through the air, and Gratian's intent. That's it. Next, overhead. He whispered so quietly that by all rights I could have never heard it, but his intentions came through loud and clear. As if being controlled by that voice, I swung my sword down. After about half a dozen such clashes, we locked blades and had a brief shoving match before putting a little distance between each other. Then we went at it again. To the audience, it would have looked like a fierce battle to the death, but I felt more like we were dancing than anything. Well, he was dancing. I was merely following his lead. But if that was his plan, whatever his plan was, I had no choice but to dance to his beat. The only thing improvisation would get me is a sword through the heart. Meanwhile, sticking to the plan, I had nothing to worry about, no reason to fear his sword might go off course. After several more fierce clashes, we got in close again. We were both breathing pretty heavily by that point. I was drenched in sweat, and it felt like I'd collapse right then and there if I loosened up for even a second. Gratian tossed a glance off to the side for the briefest of moments. His lips came together, curling up into a smile. Listen up. 3 paces back, then charge. Swing down as hard as you can. Put everything you've got into it. As soon as I signaled my acknowledgement, Gratian parried my sword off to the side. 1, 2, 3 paces back, then I gathered my strength into my legs. I crouched, like he had at the beginning of the duel, envisioning myself as a tiger, ready to pounce. And then, we leapt at each other in perfect sync. Wah! The harsh sound of metal striking metal, more piercing than anything else up to that point. For a heartbeat, the world went white. Then the whoosh of something rippling through the air. It wasn't for another second or two that I realized what had happened. Breathing heavily, I looked down at the sword in my hands, only to find half of it missing. Gratian's blade appeared to have snapped as well. The galley began buzzing. Are you alright? How dreadfully dangerous! Heh. A perverse grin spread across Gratian's lips. I finally understood what he had been scheming. He wanted the swords to break, and he wanted it to look like an accident, hoping that when the shattered blades went flying, a noble or two would be caught in the crossfire. That explained the whole song and dance, why he had us hitting each other's blades in the same spots again and again. But how the hell would you ever expect that to work? That said, if the fight had gone on much longer, I don't think I would have lasted. His plan seemed to have gone about as well as you could reasonably expect. One piece landed near Barnier, and the other embedded in the table. That's fine by me. I'd rather avoid causing any more of a scene before the actual revolt. Not that I would be opposed to seeing any of these madmen skewered. Gratian wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand and surveyed the room. As obviously outclassed as he was by all the nobles, he still seemed much larger than anyone else in the room. He took a few moments to catch his breath, then sauntered over to the center of the great hall, taking another good look around the room before saying, Apologies for the disturbance, my lord. While ordinarily a duel is supposed to end with someone dead, it looks like that's out of the question today. So, mayhap we can reschedule, put on another show in a day or two if you would like. Huh. Barnier seemed less than pleased with the outcome, but considering how rattled his guests were, he couldn't press the matter either. Very well. Now I believe you to deserve a reward for such a fine show. Ooh, what kind of reward? One I'm sure you'll be quite pleased with. The leftovers from today's feast. Gourmet cuisine the likes of which you mere slaves could only dream of getting your dirty hands on. You mean those bleeding scraps of mystery meat? Ha! Worry not. There's pork in there. Or does your religion prohibit you from eating pig? Nah, I gave up on religion long ago. I'm fine with eating meat. Most meat, anyway. I'll have the other slaves bring it down this evening, then. Now, the show's over. Be gone with you. Gone we be, my lord. I'm still concerned about that girl, but there's nothing I can do for her right now. Hopefully she lasts long enough for the revolt, but with wounds like that... Hey, kid. Pick your beat ass up, and let's get out of here. I am not beat, thank you very much. Who are you trying to fool with your wheezing up a lung? Getting huffy about it only makes you look more pathetic. Piss off, you inhuman monster. Ha! Now, do have a wonderful day, ladies and gents. Not like Gratian. Once we were out of the hall and in the corridor, I took several deep breaths, finally letting loose some of the tension that had built up within me. As we made our way through the corridors, the sound of the nobles laughing and chattering away amongst themselves faded into nothing. We headed for the rather barren waiting room where slaves without assignments were kept. In essence, it was a human closet. I looked up at Gratian, who was standing beside me. I had but a dozen things I wanted to say to him, but I couldn't organize my thoughts into words. So I simply shrugged and pursed my lips. Yeah. That was a shame. Huh? What was a shame? You were hoping to kill at least one noble when the swords broke, weren't you? Ha! If only. I'm not that skilled. Hell no. You could have fooled Moo. Moo. You could have fooled me. If anything, I'd say we were lucky it went as well as it did. It's a damn good thing they gave us their old crusty swords, or we'd never manage to break him at all. If not to skewer one of the nobles, then why go to such lengths at all? Well, because otherwise we'd have to fight to the death, of course. No, that's not what I'm... Of course, we both know who'd be standing here then. As much as I hate to admit it, he has me beat in almost every category. For God's sake, how do you even get that good with a sword? Is it hereditary or something? What I'm trying to figure out is what your ultimate objective was in this whole facade. Why challenge me to a duel at all? You're planning a revolt, aren't you, kid? What's that have to do with anything? Just answer the question. Denying it will only delay the inevitable, so no point in that. And I'm fairly certain he's not one of the Lord's side, at least. If he was just trying to win the Lord's favor, I can't imagine the duel would have ended the way it did. I could probably trust him. Yes, I am. And I need the other slaves' help to pull it off. But the little drone's been sucked all of them fight, and you can't get anyone on board. Why even ask the question if you already know the answer? Hey now, no need for the lip, kid. I brought it up because I'm trying to tell you I'm in. You're in? Excuse me? What about anything you've done today would make me think you're in? Bear with me for a second, put yourself in the other slaves' places. Some dick they never met before shows up out of the blue saying, I've organized to have you all set free and I need your help to do it. You think they're gonna buy into it? Fair enough. But it is true that I have people outside. Don't matter. You could be lying through your teeth and it wouldn't change a damn thing. All that matters is whether they think you're worth getting behind. I see your point. These slaves have been driven to the very depths of despair. They need someone charismatic enough to pull them out of that pit before they can be sparked to take any sort of action. Before infiltrating, I imagine it would be much simpler. It would seem that was rather naive of me. That was a whole lot of words to say the same thing I just said. Forget your fancy metaphors. It all boils down to this. Do they think you have a chance of pulling it off, yes or no? These people, they don't got the energy to get all philosophical. They go with their gut. And the quickest way to their gut? Show them you're strong. Ah, now I'm starting to understand what the duel was for. The other slaves already know of your prowess. So if I were to fight on the same level as you, then they'd be willing to hear you out, exactly. Whoa there, kid, why the sigh? You trying to blow this place down? You could have easily accomplished that without putting on a damn show in front of the Lord and putting my life in danger. It wasn't just for the other slaves, kid. What do you mean? I wanted to make sure you weren't some yellow-bellied peasant. That you're actually capable of doing what you promised. And now that I know you got semi-functional spine, I'm willing to help out with the revolt. Semi-functional, huh? Well, I'm glad I didn't disappoint you then. Given my performance back there, I couldn't blame you if you deemed me beyond hope. Give yourself a little more credit, kid. While I'm pretty sure the stories about my ancestors being gladiators are exaggerated, I did participate in a few death games myself back before I ended up here. You should consider it a badge of honor that you fought a brute like me and lived to tell the tale. I was under the impression the church put an end to gladiatorial games. Ah, right, it went underground. The rules may change, but not people. Always marking for blood sport. Then, yada yada, I got sold to the Lord, and here I am. That probably explains what he meant when he said he had given up on religion. So what's your story, kid? My money's on some rich aristocrat what got in his head he wanted to play hero and stop the big bad lord from being mean to his slaves. What the hell gave you that idea? You strike me as more of a prissy rich boy than a ruffian is all. A prissy rich boy? I come from the slums. So no, I'm not just some upper class punk playing hero. That a fact. Well, color me surprised. You sure don't talk or act like you're any of the slum boys I know. That's probably because... Nothing. And I'm even more curious, damn it. Honestly, it's not that interesting, I promise. Forget I said anything. It's because I want to be able to blend in when I eventually leave the slums. But he doesn't need to know that. I only just met him. Whatever you say then. In that case, how about we do some proper introductions, huh? Name's Gratian, which you should already know. Nice meeting you, kid. Jacopo. I'm very glad to have your support, Gratian. Don't mention it. I've been wanting to make the scumbags eat dirt myself, and this is the perfect chance. Oh, right, one more thing I wanted to ask. What? How old are you? Excuse me, is that relevant to anything? Jeez, kid, someone really needs to teach you how to shut up and answer a simple question. I'm 19. Oh, thank God, I'm 20. Now I don't have to feel like an ass for calling you a kid. I'm only a year younger, that hardly makes me a kid. A year is a long time, kid. Now that I got off my shoulders, I can put my all into helping with your revolt. I'm starting to wonder if I even want this guy's help. Once I had Gratian on board, it was remarkable how quick the rest of the slaves were to join in. They knew him and they respected him, and that respect went a long way toward improving my own standing. As far as they were concerned, I had fought Gratian and managed to hold my own. And the big man was right. It wasn't a clever plan or a moving speech these people needed to put the light back in their eyes. It was a show of strength. Over the next few days, as Barnier and his guests indulged themselves, word of the plan quietly spread beneath the surface. I started to see signs of life for the first time since I arrived. The majority of the slaves were emaciated and weak. There was a good possibility the guards would kill many of them. But still, I urged on any who hesitated by saying, "If you choose to stay, you're guaranteed to be killed eventually." It was true, to be sure, but in essence, I was threatening them. Help or be left behind to die. And that was enough to convince them to grab onto the thread of hope I was offering, however frail it may be. We chose the 13th day of the banquet to commence the revolt. Waiting until almost the end of the party's usual 2-week duration gave us a slight tactical advantage. Naturally, Barnier's guests did not attempt without their own protection. But after being made to watch over almost 2 weeks of debauchery, the guards would start getting exhausted. They would stop caring. And that was exactly what we needed. Hey there, Jacopo. Everything good to go on my end? Everything's good to go on my end. We can give Lord Asshole what's coming whenever you're ready. Thank you. I appreciate all your help. Whoa there, kid. Save the thanks for after we get out of here with our heads still attached. Ha, fair enough. Then how about this? If we both survive, I'll take you to the best pub in the slums. As long as there's pretty ladies, count me in. There's one I can introduce you to if you don't mind your girls headstrong and with a little bit of bite. Tough and pretty. Now that I can get behind. I spent so long surrounded by all these half-dead drones that I could sure stand for some good-natured abuse right about now. Good-natured might be a bit of a stretch. Rub her the wrong way and you'll find yourself short a pair of jewels. Think I'll pass on that one then. I don't care how much of a looker she is. I ain't ready for her to be my last. How about this then? I'll tell you what I'm looking for, and you'll have someone picked out for me by the time this is all over. Flexible in the looks, but slender and short are a must. Meaty girls ain't really my type. Blonde hair and blue eyes are a plus, but it ain't a deal breaker. And I like them to be a bit... Slow down there. You've got your head way too far in the clouds if you think you're gonna find your ideal wife at a brothel in the slums. Hey now, how do you expect me to give this my all without something to look forward to on the other side? I suppose it is a decent motivator. See? You get me. Now, on to business. You ready to do this? I've been ready, kid. Just waiting for the word. That's about as good an answer as I could have hoped for. Now, before we begin, I want to go over the plan one last time. After you've secured weapons from the armory, you take command of the other slaves and go open the gates. While you're doing that, I'll signal to my people outside, then cause a diversion. As long as we don't make too much noise, the Lord and the other nobles shouldn't realize anything's amiss until we're on top of them. As soon as the gates are open, you head for the Great Hall where we'll rendezvous. We crash the party, and while the Lord and his friends are distracted, my people will lead the slaves to safety. And then we swipe up all the shiny things and we can carry and get our asses the high hell out of here. Right, can't forget the valuables. Huzzah, I'm getting all sorts of fired up. Don't you trip and fall on some guard sword before we even get to start our fun, you hear me? Ha, same to you. Alright guys, I'm going to have to end the video here for today. Thank you all for watching. Well, so far guys, I am enjoying this little... yeah, you could say it is a prequel because it's going back into the story of Jacopo and Morgana and how they first met. But like we're getting more insight into it, newer insights for that matter. We're getting this new character called Gratian, who's like a freaking gladiator, and I'm a little worried we might not see him by the end of this operation because throughout the flashback sequence of his backstory, of Jacobo's backstory, we never heard a word about Gratian. But I'm hoping he does come with them and lives enough to get to the slums, you know? I want to see their interactions. But I do know that we won't see Gratian for long anyway, so it's a matter of how and when it will happen. But anyways, guys, thank you again all for watching, and as usual, until the next one.